New York City homicide public defender Brian Buckmeyer for more on this. Brian, there are a few things from the questioning so far that seem to stick out. And one, this was emphasized a few times. The prosecution is asking Sergeant Greene, did Alex Murdaugh seem to be actually crying at any point while he was there? Did you actually see tears in his eyes? And he said no, that he seemed upset, but that he never saw him cry. Why is that so important? Why is the prosecution trying to clearly emphasize that?
Well, Diane, this is going to be two different arguments that the defense and the prosecution are bring forward. First, the prosecution, they're saying that Alex Murdaugh was planning this out, that he was scheming, that this is an act, that when he's speaking to the officers, he's not really feeling the remorse or the pain or the anger of coming across your wife and son killed, that he's putting on a show. So no tears, only angry. Maybe that's his way of kind of faking it to this officer. But when the defense gets on, I bet that they're going to come up and say, well, do you know Alex Murdaugh? Do you know how he grieves? Do you know how he acts when he's angry? Do you know how he acts when he's sad? And the officer's probably going to say no. Everyone grieves differently, and it's going to be up to the jury to decide whether or not this is just the way Alex Murdaugh grieves or if he's faking it.
They also asked about the tire tracks that night. Murdaugh had told the officer, according to Sergeant Greene, that he had obviously arrived to the scene, saw his wife and son there dead, had gone back to the house to get the shotgun, thinking maybe this attacker's still out there, and then came back to the scene and called the police. You heard Sergeant Greene saying he thought the tire tracks stood out because there were too many tire tracks, in his opinion, to explain just that trip back and forth from the house. What are they trying to get at there?
He's lying. This is, again, in the prosecution's opening statement, they said that you will find that what Alex Murdaugh said doesn't match the evidence. They brought up initially the cell phone records as to where he was, but these tire tracks make it seem like he's going back and forth in a way that doesn't line up with the way that he told the officer. Don't forget, we don't have the murder weapons here, and there are two different murder weapons. So, yes, maybe he went back and got the shotgun and came back, but maybe he also went back and forth to take off whatever item he was wearing that was bloody. We also heard that the officer didn't see any blood on him. Maybe he went back and forth to hide these guns and ammunition in different places where the officer didn't find them. That's what I think the prosecution is really getting at, that what he said and what they see doesn't make sense, and maybe that's why we're missing evidence.
Brian, we did also hear a couple of times, and we heard it in the soundbite that we played, the prosecution ask about blood on Murdaugh himself. Sergeant Greene testified that he couldn't see any visible blood on Murdaugh, no, not on his hands, not on anywhere on his person. But he testified that Maggie's body and Paul's body were surrounded in what he called a pool of blood. That sounds like something the prosecution's going to come back to.
Absolutely. Later on in this case, I'm expecting them to testify as to what's called stippling. That's when someone is shot in close range and there is no burned, there's gunshot residue on the person, but it's not burned, suggesting that the person was very close when you shot them. Considering the type of injuries, especially to Paul Murdaugh, you would think that if you're that close and there's stippling on the body, that there'd be blood.
Laying in his own blood with his brain laying at his feet.
That argument with the argument that they'll say, hey, it must have been Alex Murdaugh. But again, they didn't see any blood on his clothes. But these multiple tracks, maybe he ditched the clothes he was wearing. Maybe it's that raincoat where they saw gunshot residue on. That's something the prosecution's got to tie together for the jury to make sense of.
Mentioned raincoat. There was talk of rain and some water at the scene, whether it could have been caused by rain or not, and an objection at that point. What did you make of that moment?
I think the objection was as to speculation, that the prosecution doesn't have the evidence to say one way or another that this is how the jury should rely on that bit of information. You don't want a jury speculating as to why someone may have done something, why a piece of evidence may be incriminating or not. And that's for the judge to decide. They're the arbiter or the person in charge of evidence and how it comes in. So I think that was smart to make an objection there, because you don't want the jury speculating, if there isn't evidence to support it, that this raincoat has evidence of guilt if the prosecution can't bring it forward.
And Brian, before I let you go, I do want to ask one more. One of the first things we hear Murdaugh tell Sergeant Greene as he arrives is, this is a long story. My son was, I think he says, a boat race or boat case. It's a little bit unclear from the audio, but either way. And he says he's been getting threats. I know that's what this is. What did you make of that?
It's going to be a tale of two different stories. My mind is that of a defense attorney. And so I'm thinking that's and trying to put together the pieces as to who may have been the suspect here. Don't forget, he's also a prosecutor, so he might be trying to piece this together in his mind for the police. But it's equally as plausible that this is his way of putting the blame on someone else, trying to direct this investigation away from him.
And that reference to a boat race or boat case has to do with a crash that his son Paul was involved in years ago, a deadly boat crash. All part of a very convoluted story that all works into this case, and we, of course, are going to stay on top of it. ABC News contributor, New York City homicide public defender Brian Buckmeyer, thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.